Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me tonight, as usual, is my colleague, Clayton Jones.
Good evening.
Good evening. And as I was watching the opening credits, saw some clips of Al Robinson, who was the host before me. Reminds me that we have this last month celebrated our 10th anniversary on the air. Now, I don't know whether that's a cause for celebration or it's an indication that we haven't really been doing our job if we're still having to push the issue 10 years after we started. But
I think we're more than doing our job. I think that the opposition is just not opening up their ears.
Yeah. Well, you know, I seem to recall something from the New Testament to the effect of, he who has ears, let him hear. So maybe if they're not hearing, it's their fault and not ours. I kind of wanted to start tonight, and you mentioned this earlier, with looking at a couple of developments down in Latin America.
Argentina just decriminalized personal use.
And as did Mexico.
As Mexico and several other, Brazil, several of the other countries have also decriminalized, and they're getting away from the punitive.
Well, Mexico did it by passing a statute through their Congress and signed by their president, which allows the personal possession of very small amounts of not only marijuana, but also cocaine, amphetamines, and heroin as well, without criminal sanctions, but allowing people access to counseling or help if they need it. This was basically the same bill that the Mexican Congress passed back during the Fox administration.
Lindsey Fox, yes.
And which Fox had advocated and pushed for, but the Bush presidency put a lot of pressure on him, and he buckled and didn't sign it at that time. Now, in some ways, the Argentine decision is more interesting, because that was done
through the courts
by the Supreme Court of Argentina in a case involving marijuana possession. And the court was unanimous. All 7 of the judges joined the same opinion. And what interested me was one sentence in the opinion says, it is not for the state to determine how any individual determines his lifestyle or how he should lead it. Now, if that ever was a quote from American history, that has to be it. That's pure Jeffersonian talking there. And this was a case strictly about marijuana, but most of the pundits are saying that it certainly indicates what the court would do with possession of other drugs as well.
You know, the world is starting to turn its viewpoints on the way to enforce drugs.
Yeah.
They are starting to get to the point to saying, why are we spending all this money to put this low-level user in prison for years?
Yeah. Now, President Calderon of Mexico said that one of the reasons why they passed this law was that it would free up their police forces and their courts to go after the big-time dealers and growers rather than wasting it all on street people. Yeah. And we were talking earlier also that virtually all of Western Europe has decriminalized either formally or informally. Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing to try to get marijuana anywhere in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, you were saying France and
Sweden and France still talk hard-nosed about it, but I understand that that in France, at least, it's mainly talk and very little action. Italy, possession is still against the law, but the Italian police just never do see it.
Well, you know, this wish-washy, it's against the law, but we don't arrest you, but we can.
Yeah.
If we want to bust your fanny, we can arrest you.
Well, you know, the problem with that, and we see some of it here in the United States, the problem with that is it leaves the policeman on the street corner in charge of the whole thing, which means that people end up getting arrested not because they've got a marijuana joint, but because they pissed off a cop.
Yep.
And there shouldn't be that kind of discretion at the street level. Now, a lot of times a good policeman will overlook things that he sees, but he shouldn't have that kind of almost absolute power to arrest people because he doesn't like them. And I think you pointed out a couple of weeks ago the horror stories about the marijuana arrests in New York recently, didn't you?
New York?
New York City.
Oh, there's so many arrests in New York City. It's pathetic for marijuana. And we keep hearing on the news that people walk down the street smoking marijuana. The police don't bother them. But they've got one of the highest rates of arrests.
Well, about in the 1970s, and I don't remember exactly when, New York was one of the states that decriminalized marijuana possession. And possession of a small amount, 5 or 6 grams or something, was a civil offense with a maximum fine of $20 and no criminal record. But what they started doing first under Giuliani was that I hung out at places like the Village and Washington Square late on Friday afternoon and find people with a little bit of marijuana, take them in, and since there wouldn't be a judge to see them and set the fine at $20, they'd have to hold them in jail over the weekend so they could pay their fine on Monday morning. What has been happening lately, though, in New York, it's still a misdemeanor with jail time to possess marijuana in public. In other words, if it's in your pants pocket or your purse, it's okay. That's a civil fine. But if you happen to be holding a bag of it in your hand or smoking a joint, that's possession in public and you can go to jail. So what apparently has been happening is that the police have been going to places where young people congregate. They will confront a young person, insist on their right to pat the person down, which a policeman can do to look for weapons. Now, I never saw a weapon that was soft and squishy, but that's beside the point. They'll find a lump in someone's pocket, instruct the person to empty their pockets. The person takes whatever in their pocket is out. That leaves a small bag of marijuana in his hand. Bingo, he's then arrested for possession in public. Now, under the circumstances, any first year out of law school lawyer who barely scraped past the bar exam could win that one. But who can afford a lawyer and who's going to risk a trial and a maximum sentence for a misdemeanor possession of a small amount? So what happens is the city of New York happens to have not only the highest number of marijuana arrests in the nation, but one of the highest per capita rates. And it's simply because the police are enforcing the law they want to enforce rather than the law the legislature intended them to enforce.
Selective enforcement.
Well, this is more than selective enforcement. This is perverse enforcement. That's like what we're seeing a little bit of in Massachusetts with their decriminalization last year,
Yep.
which set a fairly stiff, actually, civil fine with no record for possession. Under urging from prosecutors and police, several of the towns have passed local ordinances
Right.
to make showing marijuana in public a jail time offense. We are seeing it in Michigan, where the Michigan police are grudgingly accepting the new medical marijuana law, but if you don't cross every T and dot every I, and if you've got 1/10 of an ounce more pot than you're allowed,
You're busted.
then they swing the hammer at you. I mean, this is perverse enforcement. That's not selective enforcement.
You know, it costs somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 per person per year
To hold them in jail, yes.
to have them in jail.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know we had that much money to waste.
Well, we can always take it from the public school budgets. That's what
Well,
we've
they
been
have
doing.
been.
That's what we've been doing in Texas. I mean, Texas right now, I think, has the highest jail and prison population of any
Yes.
state in the union. We passed California a couple of years back. I think I'm not sure about this, but I think it's 120 some odd thousand people in prison in Texas now.
Wow.
And if you multiply that by about 25,000 a year, that's a lot of dollars coming out of the state budget. A state that can't afford to cover children for medical care, a state that, in effect, has been cutting the funding off for higher education. But we can spend billions to put drug possessors in prison.
And then you have the drug task force on the streets that are spending more money going around arresting all kinds of people.
Well, there was one story that hit the front page of the Houston paper a couple of months ago.
Young lady dying?
No, this was about a drug task force bust that arrested, I think, 50 some odd people, sweep all across the city. And it turned out that the investigation leading to these arrests had been going on for 3 or 4 years.
The steroids.
And no, this was not the steroid bust. This was, I think, cocaine, but I don't remember. Involved thousands of hours of transcribing telephone intercepts, among other things. Now, the police, a bottom-level policeman, I think's making around $40,000 a year. That's around $20 an hour. So 1,000 hours worth of time transcribing telephone recordings would be a minimum of $20,000. Now, how many total hours of investigation time went into an investigation that lasted 4 or 5 years and ended up with 50 arrests? And you know, the funny thing is, the day after those arrests, there was still the same amount of drugs on the street and still the same number of dealers. It was money down a rat hole. They're telling us we have to take a break, so we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
2009, Yes We Cannabis, September 24th through 26th, 2009, in San Francisco, California.
The war on drugs has been an utter failure, and I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
President Obama was right in 2004, and 5 years later, the American people agree.
As regards to legalization, it's not in the president's vocabulary and it's not in mine.
We're working hard to make sure legalization is in the drug czar's vocabulary.
Whether legalizing marijuana would improve the economy. The answer is no. I don't think that is a good strategy.
There's nothing funny about legalization, Mr. President. Registration, sponsorships, and vending information is available at norml.org or by calling 888-67-NORML.
Hi, I'm Rita Sapansky. I'm the Director of Drug Policy Alliance's New Mexico office. Here's why I do what I do. A few years ago, I met a woman who has a serious illness that could kill her. It's AIDS. The government has been denying her medicine that she knows will help her, that will help her eat. She struggles every single day to get her food down. She's under 90 pounds. Every time we go to the legislature every year, she loses a few more pounds, but she is my motivation, and I keep going in this fight to get legal access for medical marijuana in New Mexico because of her.
Good evening. You're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
Hello, welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. This device on the table in front of me is a telephone. This particular version is so old-fashioned, a lot of you may not recognize it, but there is a phone number on the screen, and if you want to make a comment or ask a question, we certainly welcome your calls. And if you're watching us over the internet or delayed on YouTube, we have an email address where you can send me an email, and I will either reply to you directly or we'll bring it up on the next show. This really is your program, and we kind of take our leads from you about what you're concerned with and what you want to hear about. We work the way I think your congressman should work, in that when you say something to us, we try to listen and try to respond to you. Maybe some of them will watch and catch the idea that that's the way things should do. But,
you weren't talking about Culberson, were you?
Well, I wasn't talking about John Culberson directly, but I understand that you had a little run-in with John this week.
I didn't have a run-in.
Somebody's phone's not turned off. Go ahead.
That's this.
That's this. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask the gentleman who in the legislature, state legislature, is supporting marijuana type delegalization, so that we can vote on those. We can vote towards those people. So I'll hang up and let them comment.
Okay, Clayton, you're the man that watches the legislature so closely. Why don't you...
Oh, boy. I don't know too many people that are outwardly in favor of it.
Yeah.
NASTAT is the one that has sponsored the bill for us last couple of go-arounds. He's from Dallas. He has been a big asset to us. Other than that, you need to sit and talk to each and every one of them. I would have to say it was almost unanimous in the House last year. Debbie Riddle presented a bill that, in her bill, and I'm going to surmise it quickly, it said that if you get caught smoking marijuana, possessing marijuana in the presence of a minor, it would give you 1 year in jail. And all your House of Representatives people voted in favor of it. It went unanimous. So we have to talk to all of them.
Yeah, and I would say that they're not going to change your minds until you give them a reason to do so.
Right.
And frankly, my feeling is that the most effective way to deal with your representative is face-to-face and in person. All of them have offices in their district and have some office hours there. If you can't find the time or way to talk to them personally, the next most effective thing to do, apparently, is to handwrite them an old-fashioned letter on a piece of paper and send it to them in an envelope with a stamp on it. For some reason, that really, really impresses them. And when an issue comes up for vote in the legislature, they normally get the mail they have received, stack the letters up, and see which stack is the highest. If you can't handwrite it, you can type it. If you can't send a real letter, you can send an email. And if you can't do any of those, the least effective is probably a phone call, but it's certainly much better than nothing. Do you have anything to add to that?
I try to go see my representative, Dwayne Bohack,
Yeah.
at least 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Non-legislative years, like next year,
Yeah.
I'll be on his back as much as I can. I mean, I don't like the way he represents me. I don't think he's really has the popular position
Yeah.
when it comes to people in my neighborhood.
Well, I think something also that's important, this next legislative session, 2010 is the census, and that will be followed by legislative and congressional redistricting. If you get on the internet, look at state government, and look at the maps of both the districts for the state legislature and for the congressional delegations, you'll find jigsaw puzzle pieces make more sense than these districts do. One of the state districts runs all the way from the western parts of Houston into the eastern parts of Austin. It was done that way so that a rural Republican majority could overwhelm the liberal Democrats in the two cities. One of the things that really needs to change drastically in the next legislature is the way the state is divided up into districts. And here I'm probably a real heretic. Making districts that favor politicians is a tactic older than the U.S. Congress. So some of the old British parliamentary districts, the rotten boroughs, actually had no voters in them. The landowner simply named who he wanted to Parliament. Our very word gerrymander comes from the way Eldridge Gerry, a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a congressman from Massachusetts, jiggled his congressional district so that it was kind of zigzagged all the way through the middle of the state of Massachusetts. A political cartoonist thought it looked like a salamander, so we've had the word gerrymander. And it used to be hard to do because juggling the numbers to make the districts more or less the right size and fit them on a map was really just kind of trial and error, cut and paste with pencils and papers and maps. But we have enough tools with computers and mapping techniques now that we could do a much better job of coming up with equal representational districts that fit population lines, matched political boundaries like city limits and things like that, and which did not give overwhelming advantages to either of the political parties. And I really think that we should give some thought to a politically neutral, technology-driven redistricting committee to come up with some proposals for ways to realign the state, both at the congressional level and the state House and Senate levels, for this next redistricting scheme. I think we could come up with a bipartisan way to appoint a committee that would have primarily technological representatives. I suspect this is a good place to put college professors to work with some computer science guys and some geographers, and see if they couldn't come up with a way that would redistrict and that would be people-oriented rather than politician-oriented. Now, I'm sounding like a wide-eyed, pie-in-the-sky idealist here, but sometimes you have to reach for an ideal to get something practical.
Really?
So that may be where this battle's really fought, is on who gets to redraw the political maps after next year.
Well, didn't Tom DeLay have something to do with those districts? It has something to do with him being retired, isn't it?
Well, that may have entered into his being justly chased from office, but he actually forced an extra special redistricting through the Texas legislature just to try to nail down more completely a Republican Party advantage, not necessarily reflecting the political makeup of the people at all. And that's the kind of thing that needs to stop from both sides of the aisle.
You know, when I was at John Culberson's town hall meeting last Friday night, I sat there and listened to the man talk for about 20, 30 minutes and just really listened, didn't try to agree or disagree, and and I felt that he tried to do more to separate people than to bring us together. It was almost like he was trying to agitate people.
John is one who has always played strictly to an extreme wing of his party. He is very much an us against them kind of politician. He's what some people call a wingnut. And John, it's been a long time since I asked you some questions in the law school classroom. But I'll give you an invitation right now. You can come onto this show at any time. We'll let you be a guest for any part of the period up to the full hour, and we'll ask you some questions, let you try to answer them, and we'll give you an honest chance to get a factually based version of your views on these matters in front of a voting population. So, John, have your office give us a call, and we'll schedule it at your convenience. But we'll have the mic open for you and a chair waiting whenever you care to take advantage of it.
Well, this week I'll call his office and invite him.
Okay. Okay. And frankly, I would say that goes for any other members of the Texas congressional delegation, that we would be happy to have any of you come. They're telling me it's break time again. I'm better mannered than my hero, Craig Ferguson, so when they tell me to break, I try to do so. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility, perfectly legal and just.
Okay, maybe a little of the money I spend on marijuana supports terror and violence.
Right.
And that's because marijuana is illegal.
Exactly.
When I buy a beer, that doesn't support terror because beer is legal, right?
Now you've got it.
So what you're saying is if we make marijuana legal and regulate it like beer, that wouldn't support violence.
Did I say that?
Okay, we're back again. We have been kind of talking politics lately, and we talked some changes around the world before that. What seems to be next on the agenda?
Well, Barney Frank has got a good bill that's in Congress right now.
Yeah, his is, as far as I know, the only one actually active this session.
Right. It's House Bill 2943, and it basically says that it's going to give each and every state the right to have medical marijuana.
Yeah. And
that's what the bill is about. That's what the bill will do. We need to call people like John Culberson, Mr. States' Rights, Mr. Jeffersonian,
and point out that this gives power back to the states. Yeah.
And tell him that we do need to have this bill in favor for our state.
Yeah. And then we only have to convince the knuckleheads in Austin, and we'll be on our way.
We got more knuckleheads around here than we know what to do with.
But I think Frank's bill is a great improvement over the Hinchy roarback for the last several sessions. But I have been thinking about something else on the federal level, and there may be some mileage to this, and maybe not. But about 15 years or so ago, the Food and Drug Administration threatened to start writing regulations concerning vitamins and herbal remedies.
Yep.
People went into a real flap about it. Congress passed a law setting up a special regime for herbal remedies and dietary supplements. And basically, they required them to be marketed without any specific health claims, to meet standard purity requirements, and to be sold freely but subject to FDA aftermarket regulation if they made any specific health claims or if they used any deceptive marketing. And the more I think about it, the more I think, marijuana sure is a herbal remedy.
Yes.
I'm thinking that one very easy way to handle things would simply be to move marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act over into the Herbal Remedy and Dietary Supplement Act.
You know, I think our government is moving in a totally opposite way in this subject. We see South America going decriminalizing, and our government's not saying anything.
Hello, hello, caller. You're on the.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Can you turn your television down, please?
Yeah. Can you turn your television down, please? Yeah. Can you turn your television down, please? All right, I'm doing it. There goes. Hey, anyways, I'd like to ask you a question.
Okay.
I just saw your commercial on pot, and I support that. I totally with that. Like, how's it gonna, how are you gonna,
okay, let's.
Some of it is harmless, and I'm putting it out there to all you stoners out there saying, what's up? This is Jeff Freak, and I love your show, man. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm not going to say that marijuana is harmless. There have been people that have died from overdosing on water.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen people choked to death from a misswallowed bite of good, healthy red steak. So I'm not going to say that anything is harmless, but marijuana comes pretty close. And one of the ironies that I have been noticing lately is particularly a study that came out of Colorado that showed as the number of marijuana users increased, the number of alcohol users and the number of tobacco smokers decreased. Now, tobacco and alcohol are among the most deadly substances in our society today.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the 100,000 or so that it kills directly through disease, alcohol manages to kill another 15 or 16,000 every year through car wrecks. So it looks to me like if marijuana use decreases the amount of alcohol drunk, we probably should be running just as fast as we can to legalize it.
We all feel that way. It's this group of people that we have in Washington and Austin that don't feel that way.
We don't all feel that way, Clayton. And this is where I feel a failure as an educator and as someone that's been broadcasting for a long time. It's amazing as I look at letters to the editor from across the country, how many people still think that marijuana is a dangerous drug, that taking marijuana turns you into a drug fiend and makes you aggressive and go out and kill people, that marijuana makes you a reckless, dangerous driver like a drunk driver.
Yeah,
I don't know what it takes to get through to these people and convince them that they're just barking up the wrong tree completely.
I don't find people saying those things as much anymore as before. What they're saying is, it's against the law.
Yeah, and here's another story I repeat a lot. Thoreau, the essayist, the Walden's Pond guy, got thrown in jail for refusing to pay his taxes because the taxes were being used to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act. While he was there, his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson came to visit him in jail and said, "Why are you in jail, Henry? It's awful that you're in jail. Why are you in there?" And Thoreau said, "No, Waldo, that's not the shame and that's not the question. The question is, why are you out there?" Saying it's against the law sometimes means the damn law needs to be changed.
Exactly.
Thoreau, Gandhi, Martin Luther King are the three great names in civil disobedience, which simply says sometimes you gotta break the law to make the law more just.
Yes.
And when you think about it, the American Revolution was nothing but a large, violent, massive group conspiring to break the law of England. And we did a damn beautiful job of it. So, sometimes when I hear people say, but it's just against the law, the answer to that, well, does that mean I'm wrong or does that mean the law's wrong? And if the law's wrong, what are you going to do about it? Some laws need to be broken. And some laws need to be broken by everybody. And sometimes the only way you can get rid of a bad law is by breaking it. Now, The government has claimed that there are about 15 million Americans that use marijuana at least once a month. Houston has about 1% of the nation's population. So 1% of 15 million is about 150,000 marijuana smokers in the city of Houston.
Oh, that's way off.
Now, those are the government's figure, 15 million smoke once a month or more often. If you took that 15,000 people, that's about 4 times the total size of the Houston police force. If every one of those 150,000 people showed up at the city council meeting and stood around City Hall outside and lit up a joint, what could the city do? Sometimes you've got to take the law into your own hands.
You know, I believe that it has come to the point that we should start doing civil disobedience within our state to show our disapproval. Next time we get a bill in our state legislation, I believe that we need to find a big lot right up in Austin and have medical people camping out until they pass the bill.
You think Willie would show up and sing to us?
I think he would.
Something to think about. And what would it happen if, to get personal about it, we had 10,000 people in front of the state capitol building in wheelchairs smoking a weed when the speaker brings the gavel down to start the next session? It's a big state. There's a lot of people in it. I think we could probably do it.
Well, I think that between Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, we can have that number easily.
Let's don't live out El Paso and Lubbock and Amarillo. I mean,
well, they're a little ways away.
Yeah, but it's a big state and they're big cities.
Well, I welcome them all. I want them all there. If you smoke marijuana, not next year, 2011, we'll have another legislative session, and maybe we can have about 10,000 people smoking marijuana on our state capitol, and I think that would probably make national news.
Well, it should at least make the Austin, Dallas, and Houston papers, and that's hard enough.
And I think that would kind of say that the people of this state are fed up.
Well, it would be even nicer. I mean, if we're just spinning daydreams here and not tying it to reality, what would happen if the day before that, 1 or 2 or even 3 chartered buses left downtown Houston, downtown Dallas, downtown San Antonio with great big marijuana leaf signs on the side of the buses headed for the Capitol building, with the people inside carrying their sleeping bags and their signs.
Well,
how many buses could be put together to converge from all across the state with 1.5 years, a little longer, or about 1.5 years left to work on it? And we have to break again. Maybe we'll have to get back to reality after this break.
I think that's something worth.
Hi, I'm Nadia Swaby with the Marijuana Policy Project. This is Marijuana 2-Minute Truths. Today's question comes to us from Chris, who asks about marijuana's effect on brain performance. Reefer Madness propaganda would have you believe that marijuana causes brain damage. But once again, concrete science disproves this. The Institute of Medicine published this conclusion in 1999. Earlier studies purporting to show structural changes in the brains of heavy marijuana users have not been replicated with more sophisticated techniques. A 2006 study published in Harm Reduction Journal reported that with regard to marijuana use, no pattern consistent with evidence of cerebral atrophy or loss of white matter integrity was detected. It is concluded that frequent cannabis use is unlikely to be neurotoxic to the normal developing adolescent brain. That said, one of the more lasting myths about marijuana is that it leads to anti-motivational or amotivational syndrome. You're probably familiar with the stereotype, the lazy abuser half asleep on his couch. In his book, Understanding Marijuana, Dr. Mitch Earlywine explained, laboratory studies of humans and primates show little support for amotivational syndrome. School performance does not vary with cannabis consumption in college students. No studies show the pervasive lethargy, dysphoria, and apathy that initial reports suggested should appear in all heavy users. Of course, there are lazy people who use marijuana, just as there are lazy people who eat a lot of food or watch a lot of television. But consider a recent study that says nearly 100 million Americans have used or tried marijuana. If marijuana really leads to amotivational syndrome, where is the epidemic of American laziness? This has been your 2-Minute Truth. There is no evidence that marijuana makes you lazy or causes any structural brain damage.
And we're back again. We kind of let our enthusiasm take us off into some daydreams and some wishful thinking. The last few minutes, maybe we need to find something more practical to finish up with tonight. But it would be nice if we could organize, could come up with some sort of big, statewide, broadly based effort for the opening of the next legislative session.
I think that would be great.
Can't be done by two guys sitting on a table in Houston, though. It would take organization all across the state and hard work to carry it off. So, but in the meantime, I noticed that we're already having the beginnings of a hot mayoral election race here in Houston. I know the players are starting to jockey around position for the gubernatorial race. So there are going to be some politics that become involved. And I would say that on the local level, with the mayor especially, how the police force is used, what's to be done about using citations on possession-type misdemeanors as opposed to arrest, structuring and control of the city jail and even the county jail, although that's not directly under the mayor, even how the police force is to be used, whether we want to keep wasting people on undercover operations or put them out doing real police work, to what extent, if any, we want to cooperate with the federal drug enforcement. These are all hard, solid local issues that can be brought up in this coming mayoral race.
So we're trying to tell you, get abreast with the issues and make some visits as these people are out speaking. Ask your questions, and we can determine who would be the best to lead us.
Yeah. And there are hard numbers connected to most of these. One I keep repeating is that some of the studies show that it takes a police officer about 15 minutes to write a citation like a traffic ticket and process it. It takes the same policeman about 3 hours to make a misdemeanor arrest, transport and book the accused into jail, and do the paperwork with that arrest. Now, 15 minutes as opposed to 3 hours. 3 arrests would more than make up a full 8-hour shift for a patrol officer. Every 3 marijuana accusations done by citation rather than arrest is the equivalent of putting one more full-time patrol officer on the streets. Right. And we keep hearing that our police force is short-handed. We need more police officers. We also keep hearing about the city being in a money crunch. So let's get the city to think hard about letting those officers write tickets and get back on the street rather than wasting their time taking someone to jail. Now, that's just an example. These other issues have the same kinds of hard numbers attached to them. How much it costs to keep someone in jail as opposed to leaving them out on bond, or non-jail punishments as opposed to locking them up. Do your homework, find the numbers, and ask the politicians about them. That's the way that you get changes to happen. But, you know, it's we the people. That's what the Constitution says. But that means we have to do the work, and that means we have to do the homework. We have to know what we're talking about. And then we need to get the message home. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I see your lips moving, but I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. We'll have to check and make sure the microphones are working.
Okay. Well, anyway, I wanted to say I'm in the middle. I came in the middle of this. My name is Bill. Who am I talking to?
I'm Terrell or Buford.
Mr. Buford?
Yeah.
Anyway, I saw what you, after the break, called daydreaming. I was listening to you there, and I loved your radicalism on that. I think we do need to do something like that. I've been waiting, since the 60s, some kind of turnaround in this.
Yeah.
And we need to do something. People are sitting on their hands for too long now.
I think that a lot of us with longer, grayer hair have the 60s come back to mind on this. Yeah, but...
well, I remember I had fellow college students and different things writing papers at that time about that the legalization of marijuana would probably happen in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that going down. And why, this is the first time I've ever caught your show, so I don't know what you've addressed and what you haven't.
Okay.
But what is it about these people who refuse to see what is really going on out here?
If I could answer that question, I might have been able to make some changes. Part of it is fear. Part of it is we've all listened to the official propaganda for too long. Part of it, there's a strong religious base to it. And part of it is just a big reluctance on the part of politicians to admit they've made a mistake.
I have conservative friends who also smoke.
Yeah.
And it has always mystified me why they continue to support a political movement which goes adversely to the way they like to enjoy themselves.
Well, that's been one of the mysteries. You would think that conservatives would be telling the government to get out of their damn business, but it doesn't happen that way. We're running late in the night.
Okay, well,
I'm glad you called.
Thank you very much.
If you want to follow up, I've got an email address on the screen, and drop me a note.
Yes, I'll see it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think a lot of people are at that point.
Yeah. Well, this last month, among other things, was the 40th anniversary of Woodstock.
Yep.
And there are a few of us around who at least vaguely remember those days and the feelings of possible change that came with them. maybe the 40th anniversary of Woodstock is a good time to try to revive the spirit of Woodstock and to think that we're young, that light in our eyes is the sun coming up, not the world burning down, to get some enthusiasm, some vigor, and particularly to get some optimism that we can get together. We don't need to sing about the age of Aquarius. And I wish I could play guitar like Hendrix, but even that's not necessary. But maybe it's time to resurrect the spirit of Woodstock and start saying, yes, we can, and get active again.
That's what it takes.
So,
it takes more people getting active.
Yeah.
A few of us can't do it on our own.
Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is to get mad. Because when you get mad, you get ready to do something. Mm-hmm. And I get the feeling every once in a while, Clayton, that you kind of get mad about this sometimes.
Oh, I have been so tempted to do some type of civil disobedience on this, medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Because I honestly do believe my idea has been to camp out while they're having a legislative session with signs somewhere right around Austin, right off the freeway, and it would grow on its own.
Well, the problem is that's right in the middle of winter.
Yep.
And you're talking about 120 days.
Yep, of sick people being out there in the cold. Yeah. And just think how strong they would feel for being out there.
Okay, boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time tonight. But if you have ideas about how to take this to the public, how to get our message across, how to go more popular with it, use the email. Let us know how you feel, and we'll try to spread some ideas around. In the meantime, it's your government. Make it listen to you. Get the politicians' attention and tell them what you want done. And in the meantime, we'll keep thinking about it. We'll keep working, and we'll see you again in about 2 weeks.
Have a good week.
Yeah. But keep those minds thinking. Share your ideas with us, and we'll see if we can spread it around, and if we can't work together, maybe we can make a difference. If not, maybe we'll just have to get together in the mud in upper New York State and have a weekend-long party. So, good night, and come back and see us again in 2 weeks.
Present policy of drug prohibition is hopeless. It is hopeless. It will never get better. Literally, victory today is being defined as slowing down the pace of defeat.
We ought to listen to science and medicine when it comes to whether marijuana or any other substance has a medical benefit.
The fact that marijuana is the